Barton, what's up, man? Welcome to Dad Edge. How are you?
I am phenomenal. It's so
Uh,
good to be on with you.
Good to see you, man. Good to, hey, we're talking about man health, dad health, but we're going to be covering a couple different topics today that I've seen these two topics in particular, like really hit home with a lot of our audience. And that is obviously sexual performance. And man, if I see
Uh-huh.
one more post about somebody's kid being diagnosed with ADHD, I feel like it's like the most common thing out there at this point. So I know we'll be covering those two topics, but excited to have you on, man.
Yeah, it's great to be on, and I'm so just bullish on both of those things, especially on the ADD side with kids. You know, the worst nutritional mistake I ever made was being in college and going to the doctor and getting prescribed Vyvanse and Adderall because I didn't want to just make an A. I wanted to make the highest grade in the class type thing. I was just always very competitive, and I didn't need it, but I just used it, and that's where virtually all people. I'm not going to say all, but I'm going to say virtually all. I should say all, just so people don't go, "Oh, that's he's not talking to me." I am talking to you, and you don't need this medication that's never going to get to the root cause of your issue. But we can happy to go way deep into that. Yeah, and
Let's,
why and what you
yeah,
do instead, and all these things, and ED as well. So yeah.
let's definitely start with the
Yeah.
ADHD because do you even know the statistics out there as far as how many kids, like, is it 1 in 4? Is it 1 in 5? Is it two out? Is it 50%? Like how many, what are the latest stats out there?
I think it's probably closer to, but somewhere between 50% and 30%. So I've seen different stats, and I have no idea where they're pulling their information, but it's way higher than it should be. And from a lifestyle perspective, from and really before I get into that, so the way it happened for me was I just realized that this was never going to be a tenable solution. It would never be a solution I could rely on, right? You just keep taking Adderall, keep taking Vyvanse. I mean, it's not chemically dissimilar by much than cocaine. I mean, it's a reason why the doctor prescribes it to you, and if you're caught without a prescription, it's worse than being caught with heroin. So, I mean, it's just terrible. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I know. So that should speak to a little of the dangerous side. But yeah, I was in chemical engineering, and that's a big part of what leads us today to talking about nutrition, because I merged that with nutrition, and we can get into that story in a bit. But I I just see so many kids. I saw like my, I guess you could say, step niece, just have one of the most youthful, sort of blossoming personalities. And then I went back home probably 6 months later, and she was totally different. She was like flat, just in terms of personality. She wasn't curious anymore. She was like very opinionated. She was sort of like judgmental. And what it does is it activates different part of our brains. All all ADD or ADHD medication does this. So, if you're hoping, oh well, we'll just take a different medication. Wrong. No, don't. Like bad dog. Try. No. What we need to be doing is we need to be teaching our kids um, different things about health that we ourselves may not know. So it's on us to educate ourselves. We will talk a lot about that today, I know, and what you can do differently. And then also like lifestyle stuff, like making sure that they're away from screens an hour or two before bed. They're activating their circadian rhythm in the morning. They're going out, they're getting sun, they're walking around. Um, if you just do these things, the body starts to switch into parasympathetic. The body starts to rest and digest. The body starts to heal. They don't even think about reaching for the Bang energy drink that costs you $3 and costs them their health. I mean, it's these things are terrible. If you're a teenager and you're drinking an energy drink and you're just sitting there idly, you're not even doing it for like sports performance of any kind. Like I was a wrestler. I definitely, used things like pre-workout and whatnot, but that was for specific purpose. It's like you're about to get on the mat and wrestle for a few hours, or football practice or track or whatever it was. But it's just become a habit, and it's become cool to do these things, and you have to break those chains, one way or another. And I know you've had a lot of great people on, like Dr. Robert Glover, people that are really skilled at these things, at helping from a psychology standpoint intervene, right? And but from a nutritional standpoint, that's what I really want to talk about, is how do we intervene and what do we do specifically? So
Yeah, so let's talk about that. As far as, why do you think physicians are so quick to give the diagnosis and so quick to do medication? Is it simply because, like, number one, maybe they're not educated enough? Maybe it's the fact that, hey, this is like the easiest route because we know that patient compliance to maybe, eating whole foods, and taking the right supplementation and sunlight and circadian rhythm and screen time, like we just don't maybe know these things, and even if we did know them, we may or may not even comply.
yeah, yeah. So our bodies are primarily bacteria, and unfortunately, our doctors, to really answer your question, is they are trained. I think most doctors mean well, and yet we shouldn't just hand over our entire trust of our health to them. That seems ridiculous. If we want our own ability to make choice, our own sovereignty, then we have to be able to look at our health. We have to be able to look at our finances, any aspect of life that's important, and have enough knowledge ourselves, or have mentors, have places to go. And that's really what we've created, in where you can learn and where you can take action and you can improve. Doctors, really specifically, just for anyone out there listening, it's just, I mean, you can look this up. Their curriculum, if you look up and you go class by class by class, contains on average one nutrition class. And that's the outdated sort of, we're not talking about what we'll talk about today, which is a blend between biohacking and just cutting edge nutrition. It's and that is foundational, that's approachable, that is for everyone. So doctors are trained in medicine. They spend their entire curriculum being trained in drug interactions and whatnot. And that has a place when you're at such a point, when, let's say, you need anesthesia and you need surgery, but if you've gone there, then there have been warning signs, and and it's okay, there's no blame here, but you didn't see them. And those warning lights, just like the blinking light on our dash, was not, it just, it wasn't something we paid attention to, so we kept driving, and the car needed fresh oil, but we never put fresh oil in it, and we wondered why we had an issue with the engine. So yeah, that's a big part of it. I think it's really just a matter of education and clarity. When people really get clear on how much better their life is from truly every aspect, and how easy it is, and how there is no pain in giving up gluten or dairy. Gluten, for people listening, just think wheat. Anything that has wheat in it, just cut that out, and that's a great start. That's really it. Because it's funny, I still get people asking me today, like, hey, what foods have gluten? So anyway, just to answer that, just a low-hanging fruit, that is something that leads to ADHD, both in children and grown children, us adults. I mean, we are bacteria. We are influenced by every food substance we put in our body. So one thing we've talked about is, I did a 11-day fast with no food, and just water and the minerals that we developed at Upgraded Formulas. And, did that without pain, lost weight, improved my sex hormones, talking about ED and things like that. Granted, I was lucky I didn't have an issue there anyway, but, I felt I could just feel that I had more testosterone. I could feel more acuity. So I mention that because that's the extreme portion. I know very few people that have done a 10+ day fast, but, and I'm not saying anyone needs to do that. However, I'm using that to say that we are food addicted. And that's something that I learned from that fast. It's how food addicted we are, where, I say, hey, I'm not hungry. And then my wife says, hey, come eat with me anyway. Or, vice versa. Or, and I mean, you're a great one to speak on this, but, there's fathers have to understand when to push children about eating and when, like, hey, are you hungry? If you're not hungry, I promise you, you don't need to eat. That is how we're designed for millennia. We can go days without eating, and we don't get weaker as people think. We actually get stronger. We get more mental acuity because it's our brain's way, our body and brain's way of surviving, right? So we get sharper and sharper and sharper. It's like day 10, I was throwing a backflip off a boat on Lake Austin here in Austin. Sharper, like had dropped 6 pounds of body fat at that point. And, that's the extreme end of things. But just cutting out some of these foods leads to greater and greater levels of just being able to achieve things in your life, really. So in that 10 days, I also got a month's worth of work done, and had I not done it correctly with minerals, I would have, quote unquote, bonked, and, it wouldn't have been, you just wouldn't have had the same sort of results. It would have been painful. It would have been difficult. But yeah, it's just this area of nutrition, of education that we have to be really aware of. So that's the reason why in my early 20s, I found this test, and it wasn't blood. I'd done a lot of blood testing, but I was starting to lose my short-term memory. And it had been so sharp. I mean, I'd gone through chemical engineering. I considered one of, if not the hardest 4-year degrees out there, and harder than medical school by a lot of stances. I mean, you get a minor in math, a minor in chemistry, a lot of physics, and then you choose your major, so chemical engineering, and that literally has all the requirements of understanding thermodynamics, fluid mechanics, all these things, using all that math and chemistry to get into process. So my mind is very black and white for me. That's the reason why I say that. So my mind was very, I was very aware of my mind when it started to transition. And when we're talking about ED, when we're talking about ADHD, what we're really talking about, Larry, is we're talking about a deficiency that wasn't always there, that is there now, that medicine and medication will never get to the root cause of. Because when you look at the building blocks, the constituents of that medication, it doesn't contain those nutrients that you yourself are missing right now in your life. And it doesn't mean that you'll always be missing these nutrients. And it doesn't mean that you're broken. It means that you have a chance to be healthy, but you have a very clear prescription that you need to follow. So my idea was, how do we use this test that I got tremendous value out of, this test, this consultation? How do we make that more accessible to people? And I also realized that I wasn't absorbing the nutrients I was already consuming. So the minerals specifically, like magnesium, chromium, which helps blood sugar, magnesium, which helps deep sleep, reduces anxiety. So again, to touch on ADHD, most children today are living a lifestyle and consuming things that deplete key nutrients in their body that can be tested for with your hair, not your blood. We can go into why that's key. And by doing so, or by doing that, they set themselves up for worse and worse anxiety. It makes it harder and harder to calm the mind, to quiet the mind. You know, you picture a lake where there's no ripples. That's the kind of mind you want to solve difficult problems, to innovate, to get good grades. And we don't get there unless we have a balanced ecosystem in our body, a balanced chemistry lab. So that test about 9 years ago showed me that test on a great consultation with someone that he's retired now, but I learned so much from him. Really showed me, it opened my eyes like, wow, I actually know what to work on. But simultaneously, it pulled so much hope out because I was already taking those supplements. I was taking magnesium, I was taking chromium, I was taking zinc, and I had been for about a year and a half. So I was already like intuitively doing the right things, and then I felt like a mixture of anger, confusion, like not sure where to turn, and ultimately went on this path of figuring out through using my chemical engineering background. That's the reason why I mentioned that. And I also became a nutritionist, but it was mainly my chemical engineering background to take a process, improve it, and get those minerals small enough to be absorbed easily, because most of us have gut dysfunction. Most of us are eating gluten or dairy and other things, and we have stressful lives. All of these things lead to gut dysfunction. And then the gut brain axis means that your brain doesn't work well. You have ADHD, you have impotence or ED, because your body doesn't make energy and it doesn't capture nutrients from your food well. All these different things are just huge. So upgraded formulas today is really my love letter to the world on, hey, here is a way to first understand what you're missing. Second, know what to do about it with tools that work, supplements that actually absorb. And yeah, I mean, it's a total paradigm shift. I'll state it one more time. Medication can never, ever, ever, ever be a solution to a problem that you didn't have, you weren't born with, and now you've developed. Think about that and think, I'll say it this way. If you weren't born with it and you developed it over time, just imagine for a second. Let's take every, clean slate of ideas. Shouldn't you be able to reverse that and get back to that point where you were by first identifying exactly what's missing, and second, understanding a great protocol and understand and using tools that work? Like, all right, so I'm missing these 5 things. Okay, so I need to understand how long to take those things, how much to take, how often to take, things like that. Because why? Well, because the world is elemental. Our planet, our solar system, it's all elemental. We are elemental. We are that chemistry that chemistry table that we saw in school. So to the extent that we are not measuring that and not doing something about it, we're going to have health issues. So I know that was a long monologue, but thanks for letting me get that out, because it's so key for people to understand. So.
Yeah. So share with us, let's talk to the fathers out there that they're now informed that ADHD could easily be an onset of things that are just lacking in the kid's body, or maybe interfering with processes in the body. You mentioned gluten. I mean, I'm sure obviously some of the water that we're drinking is not ideal, right? The highly processed foods like, dairy and anything that comes in a box or a bag. I mean, the mac and cheeses of the world, the Hostess cupcakes. I mean, all these things, right, that are highly processed, that grab and go. And in our society, we're more interested in, hey, how quickly can I get this? Can I get a meal for this kid, and and it tastes good? So help us identify, what do you see are the most common deficiencies when it comes to ADHD, as far as like, what are most of our kids missing? I know you said magnesium was one potentially, but I'm sure there's a whole host of other things that kids are missing.
Absolutely. So I created a product called Upgraded Memory that has just about all of these in it. Boron is another key one. Boron's linked to intelligence. Most people have never. It's also key for impotence or ED. So this is just a key nutrient.
That's so
It's
weird that you say that. I just real
yeah.
quick. I used to compete in natural bodybuilding for 15 years, and the first show I ever did was in 1995, so quite some time ago. But the guy that was training me at that point in my life recommended that I take boron as a supplement because he said, "Oh, this is great if you're getting ready for a show." And I was like, "Okay." And I just said, "Okay." So it's been years since I've taken that. But what does it do inside the body?
So boron is essential for memory. It increases electrical activity in the brain, which if you're thinking ADHD, that's key.
Yep.
It also helps with you know really reversing impotence or ED. The it's essential for so many different enzymatic processes. It actually activates vitamin D as well. So it activates vitamin D. It helps the circulation of serum to testosterone in the body. And then it helps you utilize magnesium, calcium, phosphorus. So it's a helper in that way. There's a bunch that I could go through, manganese as well, phosphorus. Um, I've put all those in that blend. Iodine is another. Women that give birth to children who they themselves have an iodine deficiency lead to up to a 20-point lower IQ. So if you're listening to this and your wife is either pregnant or nursing, she needs to be on iodine, like full stop. Here's a study for you. 6,000 people polled, right, or studied. 6,000, 96% were seen to be deficient in iodine. 96% out of 6,000. I mean, that's essentially all, because some of those people self-reported to have already been taking iodine at the time of the study. So that's exactly what I was describing for myself as well. I was taking magnesium about 600 milligrams a day, different forms, different types, and I was still deficient. A lot of people today get really, really focused on forms, and that was old technology, taking like glycinate or fill in blank, threonate, etc. It's not about the forms, it's about the absorption technology. So what I realized was it was all about particle size and stability. So all of our products, we only do minerals, all of our products are small enough to get absorbed into the gut and into the blood without digestion. So that's the key. Anyway, just a side note on forms. To go back more with memory, manganese, for example, is huge for thyroid function. That if you or your wife, you're listening to this, as a father, or even your children are overweight, or they have flabby skin, or they have like a nervousness, all of those can be signs of iodine deficiency. To finish touching on that, all of those things can also be improved by manganese. Also like low core body temp, cold hands, cold feet, things like that. Even in the summer, like not when it's 40 below outside, obviously, but in the summer, you touch your wife's hands or you touch your kids' hands and you're like, man, they're cold. Some of that is they're breathing shallowly, and they need to be breathing from their diaphragm. And there's, a lot of different ways. I recommend visualizing you're breathing through the bottom of your feet. Like your feet are firmly on the floor and you're breathing through that. That gets the mechanics accurate. I know when you and I met, I spoke about that a little bit, just to the group we were with out in Montana. So yeah, this was, those are some key ones. Phosphorus as well is key for brain function. It also promotes sexual function. You don't need a ton of it, but we put that in upgraded memory as well. Getting phosphorus from foods too, like eating more red meat is key. So, doing elimination diets and bumping that up temporarily, at least, can really be good. But ultimately, every person is different, and then it changes over time. So it changes. You do a test, you do supplementation, you get results. So therefore, your results change when you retest, and you want to keep checking your course, just like you would if you were out with a compass and you're backpacking. You want to look at that compass and not just walk and walk and walk for years on end. You want to look at it. In this case, every 3 months, so quarterly, people look at that, they do a test, and then they figure out what they need to adjust. I do it every 2 months, but I'd say, quarterly is fine. More than that, if you feel really good, you feel better and better and better, and then ultimately your body, you start reversing those deficiencies, and then your body goes, oh well, I've got plenty of zinc now, I have plenty of magnesium now, I'm actually switching back into a low metabolism state and a low adrenal activity, low thyroid, and poor blood sugar sensitivity. Yeah, or I took so much zinc. This happened to a friend of mine. He literally pays way more, than most people I've ever met. Each month to a anti-aging doctor, a husband and wife team, and he developed a bacterial infection in his mouth because he was taking too much zinc. So one of the things we test for in hair is zinc to copper ratio. So if you have too much zinc, we'll know. And we could have prevented that trip to the biological dentist and a couple $1,000 and a lot of time away from work and family. So he's a father as well. So yeah, it's just interesting to see how it all comes together. The other thing that I know you and I briefly talked about is just the food that we're consuming. So the food we're consuming has 30 to 40% less nutrients in the last 60 to 80 years. And we're not eating 30 to 40% more. So when you realize that, you go, well, what gives? Like, what do we do about this? And it really comes back to test, don't guess with your health. I see so many people just guessing. Instead, like really like test your levels, know your levels, and do something about it. Like use a tool that works. So yeah, anyway, that's the approach that I see is the most fundamental. People talk a lot about gut health and food sensitivities. A lot of those things are helpful to understand. A lot of food sensitivity testing companies out there, unfortunately, run your results right after my results, right after someone else's results, without cleaning the machine in between. And so you get this hodgepodge of things that I wish that wasn't the case, but you get that hodgepodge of things that aren't. You're like, why am I allergic to this thing? Like, I never eat it. I never seem to have an issue with it. Like, are you sure? So just another word of caution for people out there.
Mm. So, but back to if we have kids that are dealing with ADHD, perhaps what type of, and I know if you could generalize, because I know it's probably really tough to generalize, right? Because you have to take each individual, but it sounds like boron, manganese, magnesium was in there as well, if I'm correct, right?
Definitely. That's a big one, yeah.
Zinc, was that another one?
Definitely can be. Yeah, zinc is key for brain function. For guys, it's key for sex drive. It's antiviral as well. By the way, so is iodine. Iodine's antiviral and antibacterial, which makes it a lot better than Germ-X. Germ-X is actually only antibacterial, and I've said this for people for a while as they've like slathered it on themselves during the last year and a half with things as a prescription. So and that doing things like that actually worsens your gut health because you absorb that alcohol, the different things that are in it. Yeah, it's not good. So
yeah, I think what
anyway,
a lot of people, a lot of people,
what's that?
What a lot of people don't understand is your skin is like a big mouth, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you're gonna absorb things.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, very cool, man.
The other thing is fragrances. Yeah, people need to strip a bunch of fragrances out of their home as much, because that can cause ADHD as well.
So like the Glade
So
plugins and stuff
anything that
like
has fragrance in it. Yes,
that?
yes,
Oh,
yes.
okay. I did not know
So
that.
those are also made by chemical engineers, and yeah, it's really yeah. Sorry to interrupt there. It's a big shift. I mean, you have 300 toxins on average that go into one single fragrance.
Did you say 300 toxins or
Yeah,
300 ingredients?
300 toxins.
Oh my gosh, that's
Yeah,
crazy.
not ingredients, toxins,
We
or
literally
ingredients that are toxic. Yeah.
we literally just refilled our plugins like 2 weeks ago. For those of you who can't see, Barton just looked at me like, "Oh my gosh, you're crazy." But yeah, a lot of people don't know this stuff, right?
Yeah, they don't. They don't. There's a great book on that called Clean, by Dr. Alejandro Unger. If people want to read more, or you can just, take my word for it and just, snip those out of your life. It's a really easy thing to do. Same thing with in your car. Use There's so many different ways. You can use peppermint essential oil that's organic and just put it on your headrest, and it's more effective, and it has no, I get it. You pick up kids from soccer practice, there's a bunch of sweat, from wrestling practice every day, I would sweat 6 pounds of water weight. Like that went somewhere, so gym bags, all of that, like it's just easier, to do. Those are really popular now anyway. So it's like you can find them anywhere, essential oils, that is. Just, some easy hacks for people. There's also a free, well, anyway, I'll stop there. Yeah.
Wow, man, I would have never guessed.
Yeah.
All right, so last but not least, let's jump to erectile dysfunction. I actually, while we were actually on, I saw some pretty scary statistics here as of 2021 as it pertains to ED. It says by the year 2025, 322 million men will be impacted by ED. And as it stands right now, ED affects about 10% of men per decade of life. Also, 50% of men in their 50s are impacted by ED. And this is any degree of erectile dysfunction, right? It could be obviously not being able to have an erection or even maintain an erection.
Right. Right. Yeah. So, I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with nitric oxide that can help with blood flow. But one of the big things that I see is that people overall have drained their adrenals so much that sexual performance can be stressful to them. They feel like they need to perform. They feel like they are on stage. That's one type. And I think a base cause for many. So the things that help with that are having enough quality sea salt in your diet. So I start the morning with about a teaspoon of salt. Again, I know my levels. So I test my hair. I know my levels. I
Did you
do,
say a teaspoon?
yeah, a teaspoon in like a pint glass of water. Yeah. You
That's
can do a half teaspoon at least, but then test your levels and see how much you need. Like, understand it, do a consultation with our nutritionist or a nutritionist that actually understands a hair test, because a doctor won't and most nutritionists won't. But yeah, I know it sounds like a lot, but that actually in the evening too, if you get a chip craving, that's one way to know that you don't have enough salt. So that's the key. So having that, yeah, yeah. I see you smiling. You got a thought there.
there.
Yeah.
I just told my
You're
kid
like,
yesterday, I was like, I never met a chip I didn't like.
yeah, totally. I can relate. Something else we get from chips is potassium, and it's really, really hard to get potassium from our diet. That's one of the key supplements that we offer. That relationship between sodium and potassium is the most crucial in the entire body, because our heart sits in a reactive bath of sodium and potassium that allows for electricity to cause the heart to beat. To I mean, it's absurd, like, and most people don't know that. So of course those are important things to fix. Magnesium is huge. It impacts 800 different critical things in the body, 800 enzymatic pathways in the body. that we know of. There's probably more, but all disease, it's been stated, all chronic disease is in one way linked to specifically, not even just mineral deficiency that we've talked about, not vitamin again for people listening, but mineral deficiency. Um, but it's just amazing. So there's the interaction with heavy metals. So you can have heavy metals, which we test for 8 of the common heavy metals, really all the ones you need to be concerned about. And sometimes you'll have those come in and block. So it's not always just that you're low in zinc, it's that you have cadmium buildup or you have mercury buildup. So you can take selenium, you can take zinc, you can boost your sulfur. For people that have aluminum, a lot of people drink out of aluminum cans, and aluminum's constantly in our water supply. So having clean water is key. But silica, for example, can help you remove aluminum from your body over time. All of these things interfere. So when we get the heavy metals out, and we get the minerals in, those heavy metals don't have a chance to get in that binding site. Think of it as like someone that's, if you're married now, like what if someone was dating or married to your now wife? Like you wouldn't be able to also be married to her, most likely. So that is what that is what heavy metals do to minerals. They get in, and cadmium can act similarly to copper, for example, and it'll plug into the body and it'll work at a low efficiency. And that is really what happens when we don't have enough of the right nutrients. So magnesium's a key one, zinc's a key one, boron. We actually have a men's hormone health bundle that takes into a lot of these nutrients. We have a women's hormone health bundle that takes into account a lot of these nutrients, because sexual health is a big part of actual health and happiness. I always say, like, we get healthy to lose the weight. We don't lose the weight to get healthy. And when we are healthy, it's a lot easier to be happy. So I think it's key to understand that, and understand that as the focal point and the starting point, instead of going out and trying to find things that make us happy, like buying things or certain activities. It's like, if we are internally healthy, our body is humming along and vibrating at a high frequency, we're getting closer and closer to being the best versions of ourselves. You could say enlightenment, you could say best version of yourself, however, whatever language you like, but that is also true for when we're not doing those things, when we're drinking too much coffee, when we're drinking too much booze. All these things are when we're living too much of a stressful life. Those things deplete us, and that huge difference means that we need these things more and more. So it becomes a vicious cycle and becomes more and more important. So, and that links to all the things we talked about today: erectile dysfunction, brain function, ADHD, overall energy fatigue, being constipated, really any issue that you have in the body. Our bodies are, again, elemental, right? So when we're missing certain key elements, and maybe it's because we're taking them but we're not absorbing them, that's a key part, then we're going to, of course, have problems. And we're going to always have problems until we fix those root cause issues, and instead of band-aiding over with medication and giving and outsourcing our sovereignty, our right over our own health to a doctor. It's like, always wanted to create a place, because I've been to doctors and they're like, you're middle of the range. I'm like, I feel terrible. My skin looks horrible, which is always a sign. Like, if you're gray, lackluster skin, if your mind is spacey, those are key things. And then, the bonus thing too is guys that are, you're having sex, you're ejaculating daily or multiple times a day, you'll actually cause deficiencies in zinc and magnesium, because those are constituents for sperm production. So if you're trying to get pregnant, those are essential, but that'll lead to an ungroundedness, a spaciness, because your zinc to copper levels get unbalanced. and you get more sort of creative but less analytical. And as men, we need to be able to hold that polarity in our relationships, and we do that by having balanced levels of all these minerals. So specifically, so it's not, you know, in the case of my friend taking too much zinc and getting a bacterial infection, it's not just taking zinc, it's like knowing your levels, having a balanced approach. So I really hope that's helpful. I know we're running short on time, but yeah, such a pleasure to come
No,
on
man,
today.
this was super helpful. I mean, you hit the main two topics that I think a lot of dads out there are very keen on right now, have a lot of attention around it. I just want to make sure we, you know, the men, if they want to connect with you, can you please let us know where they can best find you?
Yeah, sure. At Barton's, or so Ask Barton on Instagram. So Ask Barton on Instagram. The website is the best place to get help. That's upgradedformulas.com. We have Instagram for that as well. But yeah, I'd say the website, upgradedformulas.com, formulas with an S. And yeah, that's a great place to get started.
Awesome. Well, guys, not to worry. We're going to have all the links in the show notes for you today. Really appreciate, obviously, Barton coming on and talking to us about the things that he did today. These are keen, like we were talking about, on the minds and hearts of all men out there, ADHD, as well as sexual performance, happiness, and health. So you guys can find everything that we talked about today. Go to gooddadproject.com/Friday7. Again, gooddadproject.com/Friday7 for all the show notes, for all the links that we mentioned today. Barton, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
You bet, man. We'll talk soon.